from the crypt.
Hello, boys and ghouls. Welcome to a very special interview episode of Dads from the Crypt. Today, I'm interviewing Oscar-winning director / producer J. Miles Dale. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here, man.
Thank you for coming on. And before we get started, I also want to give a shout out and a thank you to Allie, Amelia, Angie, and Chandler for putting all this together. So let's get jumping in. So what's the first movie you remember seeing?
The first movie I remember seeing, I want to say is, boy, that's a tough question. It might have been Bambi, or it was probably like an early Disney movie, maybe 101 Dalmatians, something like that. Quickly followed by Mary Poppins and those kinds of things in the mid 60s.
Right, because a lot of those because there's no home market, they just put those on over and over again. So yeah, I think that's probably some of the first ones I saw.
Yeah, there were 3 TV stations, and then you'd go to the drive-in. I also fondly remember going to Planets of the Apes double bill at that old theater at Fairfax and Beverly.
Oh yeah,
that was a lot of fun too.
And what were your early horror influences?
Well, I said, it's funny because I was really kind of more into comedy as a kid. So, I was like a big Mel Brooks fan. The first kind of horror influences were also sort of off horror. Phantom of the Paradise continues to be one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think one of De Palma's best. And so I love that take on Phantom of the Opera. And really, frankly, I started to get more into horror when I did one of my first big jobs was a show called Friday the 13th, the series, when I was in my late 20s, and we did that. And it wasn't like the Friday the 13th movies. It was based on, Paramount wanted to do a show based on Friday the 13th, but we didn't want to do Jason. So it was really a different show about a couple of people who ran an antique shop. I don't know if you're familiar, but and it was kind of the cursed antique of the week. And so we were sort of doing all kinds of, horror tropes inside of that. So that was really kind of the thing that kicked me into that. And then I started to get into a little bit more genre. And then, of course, when I met Guillermo, we went down that fun road with, Mama and the Strain and The Thing and a number of other things. So I feel like it's been sort of the second half of my career that I really have been diving into a little more.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with everything you just said. So I just want to comment that I have a long theory that horror and comedy are very much kind of the same, at least as far as setup goes, where it's set up, payoff.
Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah,
it's building,
right. If you want to use an axe in the third act, set it up in the first act, right?
Right. So yeah, you're building up tension either for a laugh or for a scare. Sometimes, depending on it switches between genres. Sometimes in horror, you set up tension for a laugh, then you scare, and So comedy and horror, I think, are very much.
It could be a nervous laugh, right? It's frequently a nervous laugh that makes you feel a little better. But yeah, so it's been interesting to do that, and then of course to work with the master of all of that has been just a great privilege for me.
And how did you get into filmmaking?
My father was a musical director and TV variety. So we moved to Los Angeles when I was 8. He was working on the Smothers Brothers show, then the Andy Williams show, and then he was the musical director on the Sonny and Cher show. So I had an exposure to the business, and I liked it, and it was comfortable. I did a couple of years of college and knew that I didn't want to, I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I wanted to be a sports agent, and then wanted to be a sports writer. And then after a couple of years of college, I realized I didn't want to stay in school for very much longer. and I got a job as a PA on a show called Bizarre, which is a funny show with John Biner. And it just sort of started from there. You know, I was a PA, then I was a production manager, and then I started producing when I was about 25, and it just went from there. So I fell kind of naturally into it. I knew the environment. I knew it was fun. I knew you got a chance to hang out with a lot of interesting and creative people. And it just sort of, you know, pulled me in that way.
And then I definitely want to talk about Friday the 13th, the series. So one of the biggest rumors that people talk about that show is that eventually one of the antiques was going to be Jason's mask. Is there any truth to that?
I think that might have been like discussed in a story meeting once, and then Frank Mancuso Jr., who was the EP of the show, who had, you know, done the Friday the 13th movies, said, "Nah, let's not do that. Like, let's not mix stuff that way." So I think it was discussed and discarded as an idea relatively quickly, because I think Frank felt that it might take some people out of the show. And also, you know, he was still continuing to do, I think he was on about Friday 7 by then. And I think there were a couple more after that. And he didn't want to cross. He actually offered me to do one of the movies afterwards. And for whatever reason, I don't think I was available. And I said, we just did 72 little movies, and I'm tired. It was a tough show. I mean, that was a very ambitious show. You know, there wasn't a ton of budget. You know, none of us really knew what we were doing. Also, at that point, remember, I was 27 years old when I started on that show. I was a baby producer. I hadn't shot much film. I'd been mostly in like live events and award shows and videotape and stuff like that. And, you know, for the jobs that have 3 or 4 people now, there was only one. Then we shot it on 35, you know, and it was you know, visual effects were in their infancy. So, you know, our visual effects were like with tape and nails and stuff like that. It was really kind of a great boot camp for a lot of people who came out of that show, a lot more knowledgeable than when we went in.
Did you feel any, because that was right around when Tales from the Crypt started, were you like watching what other anthology shows were doing and getting inspired or feeling competitive?
Yeah, well, that show wasn't an anthology show. It was continuing, but the episodes were self-contained.
Yeah.
And look, I think that was the great age of anthology. And I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about Cabinet at some point, but we were aware of all of that. I mean, the genre was very popular on television at that point. And you know, with you know, there was a reboot of the Twilight Zone. Then there was Tales, for sure. There
Freddy's
was
Nightmares.
Stories, which was so good. You know, the Spielberg show for NBC. So we were pretty cognizant. And of course, I grew up on the original Twilight Zone and Night Gallery and The Outer Limits, and you know, those were such seminal shows that I felt like, in fact, when you talk about early horror influences, it was those shows for me, because I wasn't really going to, you know, horror movies at a theater when I was, you know, 9, 10, 11 years old, but I was watching Rod Serling, you know, sucking on a cigarette during his intros and thinking he's a cool dude. But those shows, which continue to stand the test of time, were absolutely kind of seminal shows for me.
Awesome. All right, I want to skip to Scott Pilgrim, another favorite movie of mine. Do you have any like fun stories of working with Edgar Wright and how his process works?
You know, Edgar is amazing, and I've been very fortunate to you know, again with Guillermo, Edgar, a number of great filmmakers, but that was exciting to me because it all kind of starts with the music, and Edgar is so musically oriented, and he actually, it's almost like he directs the movie to the music. So all the music is picked out. You know, the music is played on set. I mean, there were a lot of songs performed in that show. Many of them were written, you know, for the film. And Nigel Godrich, you know, who we all know from Radiohead, you know, has been working with Edgar for a while now. I think that was the first time. So it was just exciting, again, with me being from a musical background, to be able to sort of be immersed in such good music and great musicianship, and Edgar's appreciation for the music. But look, it was a lot of fun. You know, I mean, Michael Cera Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I mean, you look at the other actors that came out of that who are big stars now, you know, Anna Kendrick, Brie Larson, Aubrey Plaza, who's
Plaza,
being
yeah.
It Girl this week. So many great actors who were all very young at the time. And then, of course, the cameos that came in, you know, Chris Evans and Brandon Routh, you know, Superman. So it was a lot of fun, I will say, that movie. Like, it was just fun on set every day. And Edgar's got this insanely wonderful energy that really kind of permeates, you know, his enthusiasm is so you know, infectious that it was a lot of fun to do. Again, a very challenging movie, and he, like Guillermo, is a total perfectionist. But it's funny, like, I've been involved with a few movies that maybe didn't light a fire at the box office in their opening weekend or beyond, but they have become cult classics, you know. And Scott Pilgrim is one. Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, the first one, is another. You know, we just thought we were shooting a goofy little funny movie, and again, it turned into a big thing, you know. So those kinds of films have been sort of great experiences for me, and you know, I'd love to work with Edgar again.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you say about Edgar and music, because I feel like his movies especially have a beat to them. A lot of like good, especially a good action movie, it almost feels like you're like on like a beat, on a steady beat
Yeah,
through it.
well,
Sometimes it slows down, sometimes it speeds up, but you can feel that.
like it's like if you watch Baby Driver and that shot
Oh
of
yeah.
Ansel walking to the coffee shop and getting the coffees and then walking back out, where I think they did 27 takes and almost killed the Steadicam man. If you look at how precisely the music is doing the things that it's doing, and how the lyrics, you know, you go past a pole that's got a billboard on it, and it's has something to do with the music, like it's a ballet, you know. So Edgar, he's very much you know, at the top of the podium for that kind of work. So just to see great artists like that, you know, great directors work in that way and own the space that they are working in is it's a real privilege, and it makes work fun, you know.
I want to touch on the Thing prequel briefly, and I'm wondering if you could comment on the use of practical effects that were done on set, and then some were changed into digital and some were augmented. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, we thought we came up with a really good idea, and again, as a guy who has, you know, you know, we remade Carrie, you know, which is a classic, which is just a dangerous thing to do, right? It's life on a high wire when you're remaking these movies. And with The Thing, again, very beloved John Carpenter movie, obviously, we thought we came up with a pretty brilliant idea for the prequel, you know, and to do it that way, where, you know, the last shot of our movie is the first shot of the Carpenter movie, and we did some fun reverse engineering into that. Also, I mean, some amazing location work that we did in this ice cave in Alaska, which really remarkable, and, you know, production wise incredibly challenging. But yeah, so we worked with ADI, Amalgamated Dynamics, on that, Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff, and we created some spectacular animatronic creatures, and at a certain point, Matthias, the director, realized that there was only so many things that these things could do, and we had to do some VFX takeovers, and Image Engine, who did the visual effects, really came to the party. Look, it's like, you know, the practical can get you to base camp, and then VFX sometimes has to take you to the summit, and that was certainly the case with The Thing. I mean, even, you know, Guillermo, who is a great believer in practical effects, he was a master of practical effects before he was even a director. You know, he has increasingly figured out a way to use practical, you know, to the extent that you can, and then do your fine brush strokes with VFX. You know, as an example, in The Shape of Water, the creature played by Doug Jones, I mean, there were many things that practical could do, and we even had some radio control on the ears and some other things. But for blinking and eyebrow moves that indicate, emotion. I would say almost every shot of the creature in Shape of Water was touched in some way by visual effects, but in more of a nuanced way. So I think as for great filmmakers, as the toolkit broadens for you and you understand how to use it, you use everything you can. There are some people who are slave to visual effects and maybe could use a bit more practical. So I think the art is understanding where the best balance is, right, and where you can use practical to the greatest extent possible, because it's going to feel more organic and real. It's theoretically going to cost less if you don't have to fix it too much. The actors can feel like they're not acting with a tennis ball, that's moving around on a stick. So I think that increasingly, as visual effects gets more sophisticated, the good filmmakers are figuring out a way to use both to greatest effect.
Yeah, I think the real trick is it to enhance the story, and at the very least not take you out of the story.
Yeah, and just know what's going to look, most organic. Like, again, if we could do it all practically, we would, for all kinds of reasons. But that's what I've witnessed, even just in these last 11 years working with Guillermo. We've increased a little bit every time because we can do more, and as you see the things that you can do, with Mama, it was the same thing. Javier Botet, who you may know, who's great. Yeah. He's like the other version of Doug Jones, right?
He's a great follow, I think, on the Instagram. He posts some really fun stuff.
Yeah, and he's also actually a very talented graphic designer. I don't think a lot of people know. You might know from his IG for sure, but so there he was, and we did a great makeup and we did a great costume and we did all those things, but at a certain point, when you've got him, crawling up a wall or having his legs turned backwards, there's just stuff that you can't do. So if you did that all the time, it probably would take you out of the movie, or you would say, oh, that's just BS. Like, that can't happen. But again, it's finding that great balance. And I think we've tried to do that. It's the same thing with The Strain, as an example, where, the vampires, when Richard Samuel's character has no nose, you can't do a negative space with no nose. You're not going to cut his nose off. So, those are expensive shots, but when you need to do them, you do them. And it's the same thing with the stingers that fired out. We trained all those actors up, and then, to have a 6-foot long stinger that comes out of your mouth like a snake, you don't really have a lot of practical options there. So I think it's just, it's an active imagination and a good use of all of those tools, and then great artists to make it happen. So with all of that, again, as you develop that sort of a toolkit and you see what works, you can refine your approach.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about Carrie for a second. So a good friend of mine, Caitlin, hosts a podcast called Plug It Up, which is obviously inspired by Carrie. So she wanted me to ask a question about the Carrie remake you produced. And her favorite part of it is Julianne Moore's performance, which is amazing. Chef's kiss.
Julianne, again, you're stepping into those Piper Laurie Oscar.
Yes, that's a big one.
But Julianne had no fear. And I have to say, I've had a great privilege to work with a number of really exceptional actors, and watching them work is just really such a treat. Diane Lane on Hollywoodland. So many of them. I can't even name. Bob Hoskins. But Julie dove right into it. And she was very cognizant of the hill that we had to climb. She had great character notes, and the intensity that she can turn on and off is remarkable to me. And she's so varied. She's great in dramatic roles. She's very funny. And it was a tough role, and it's, again, when you're remaking something like that, you're thinking going into it, like, I got a tremendous responsibility here to, not seem like a copycat, to do something new. We did feel like, the updating with kind of the state of school bullying and technology was something that we could lean into a little bit to make it, relatable for, a contemporary audience. And I think we did that, and I will say, critics tend to gun for these movies because of the legacy of the previous films, with The Thing and Carrie. And I will say, it's hard to do that, but coming in that there's going to be some criticism that way, and so you always try and get ahead of it. And I think the movie is a beautiful movie, and I think Julianne's performance was exceptional.
No, I think it's a tremendous movie, and the one thing I don't like about when remakes just do the exact same thing as the original, or else what's the point?
Right.
So I appreciate it. It might not work. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least you're trying something new, and it doesn't invalidate the original.
Right. Well, that's why I always had a good laugh about when you saw, 22 Jump Street, which was the after 21 Jump Street, and they come into the sergeant, the lieutenant's office, and so we got this new case, and so should we do a different approach? And the guy says, no, we're going to do it exactly like we did it the last time. And it's just such a great inside joke for, someone to say, okay, if you're going to do a sequel, to a very successful movie, like, let's go with what got us there the first time. So I literally, cracked up laughing at that. But yeah, it's you always want to do something original. And as I said, with The Thing, we thought we came up with a clever idea by doing the prequel. You're not gonna beat it, but by doing a remake. And also, it's a story that if you've told it already, if you've seen it already, and how it ends, I think it takes some of the drama out of it. With our Carrie movie, you had a pretty good idea, what the general architecture of the story was going to be, but I think there were some new twists and everything. And also, I will say, for a new audience, you try and do something original, or, like I said, bring a different color to it that makes it, distinct from, the other film.
Yeah, the last interview I did was with Mick Garris, who directed the Shining miniseries, which is, I think, a much better adaptation of the Stephen King property. The Shining by Stanley Kubrick is a Stanley Kubrick ghost story, which is a fantastic,
one of my
legendary
favorite
movie.
Movies, absolutely.
But the miniseries, I think, is a better version of the Stephen King story.
Yeah, the beauty of limited series is that it gives you the ability to stretch out, and sometimes a movie can't do that. I mean, right now we're actually we've adapted a Stephen King's Revival. I don't know if you've read Revival, but one of his more recent books, and we toyed with it. It was kind of like it could have been a limited series, but it really wanted to be 4, and it didn't want to be 8. So it was like it was going to be potentially more than a movie, but less than a long limited series. And we decided to do it as a film. So I think that every piece of material, ideally, will tell you what it wants to be in its best version, in its best format. So yeah, as you said, The Shining, with the ability to stretch out. I mean, I will say I think The Shining is kind of a perfect film. And actually, a lot of people say it's one of their least favorite Kubrick films, and it's actually one of my most favorite Kubrick films for a few reasons. I mean, I was a big Stephen King fan, so I mean that's one of them. But when you look at something like The Stand or something like that, it calls out for a longer format. I mean, Andy Muschietti, who directed Mama, as you know, and did those 2 great It films. Now they're doing a It prequel.
Yes.
TV show, right. So it's, again, like there's more in the material that you can just use the mythology and see where it takes you. And there's something interesting and fun in developing that kind of material too.
All right, then let's dive into your relationship with Guillermo del Toro. How did you start your working relationship?
Well, we started with he was directing Pacific Rim in Toronto, and at the same time he had made a deal with Universal to make Mama. Andy had directed the short film. Andy was going to direct the feature, so Andy was kind of a first-time director. He was a big commercial director, and Guillermo needed someone to produce the film for him because, you know, if you're directing Pacific Rim, which was a massive undertaking, you don't really have any time. He had asked Edgar about me because Edgar and Guillermo were friends. We met. I definitely wanted to do anything with Guillermo. I had also already made a number of films for Universal, so you know, it was all a big happy family. So we did it, and we kind of worked out of the same studio, or you know, I could run down the hall to, you know, see Guillermo if I needed to, and you know, tried not to bother him any more than I needed to. And you know, when I needed some help with, you know, Andy on something, he was right there. And that's when we met, and we did Mama, and obviously I think it, you know, it went very well. I think it's a beautiful little film, and
Mhm.
and then after that, next up, he was slated to do the pilot of The Strain, and he asked me if I would do the pilot with him, and I wanted to do something with him as a director, not just as a producer. So we did that, and then he said, "Will you stay for the first season?" And then I was like, "Yeah, I'll stay for the first season." And then, of course, I got to love it, and I started directing episodes, and I became kind of the producing director on that show for 4 seasons, and I directed, I think, 7 or 8 episodes, including the series finale, which was great fun. You know, I liked to direct to make me a better producer. So I started directing. It was a funny story, actually. It was on Friday the 13th that Mario Azzopardi, one of the directors, said to me, and remember, I'm 30 and I'm very green and didn't know a lot about, you know, high-end filmmaking, but he said to me, you know, you should direct one of these. And I said, wow, that is so nice of you to say that you think that, you know, I've got the skill set to be a director. And he goes, no, you need director empathy. He said, you've got to walk a mile in my shoes so that you're not just saying no, or, you know, we've got to pull the plug when I may need a shot that I'm going to need in the editing room, or a close-up, or, you know, you need to feel the hot breath of a 12-hour day and know what you have to do. And I had worked with a producer a number of years before that, and actually it was my first producing job. I was 25, and it was an anthology show called True Confessions, and it was an impossible show. It was 25 episodes in 25 days, anthology, on location, different cast, different everything, like $40,000 an episode or something crazy. And the producer of that show was a guy by the name of Alan Landsberg, who was a famous television producer in the 70s and 80s. That's Incredible, a number of other shows. And he had written, it was a one-page thing that I'd read in the Hollywood Reporter, and the summary of it was really that every good producer should actually do every job at some point, so that he or she knows the value of every job, because now you're making decisions, right? And you're sometimes forced to, you know, be the arbiter of those decisions about, you know, where resources are going, and time, and, you know, not just story and everything else, but, you know, you should spend some time in post-production, and you should spend some time in the hair and makeup, or in the art department. And I really took that to heart, where, you know, I was always asking a lot of questions and digging into the minutia of what all those people did, so that I could understand it, so that I could make decisions. And of course, the biggest one of those is directing, because, you know, oftentimes, you know, when you're in that spot and you have to make some of those decisions, you know, there's a lot riding on it. There's consequences. There's, you know, financial and schedule consequences. There's certainly creative consequences to a show where, let's say, you just don't have enough coverage, or, you know, you've got a couple of takes on something and it's not there yet, you know? So, you know, I went from a line producer who was rushing people along to someone who, you know, was able to make those decisions. I also found that when I was directing, you know, instead of a guest director coming in and he or she is there for, you know, a couple of weeks and, you know, may not know everything, it was great with the actors, because they all knew that I knew every lick of everything they had ever done, because I was there from the beginning of the show till the end. I knew where they had been, what they were doing now, where it was going. And so there was some comfort and some more shorthand with the actors. So for all kinds of reasons, I started directing. I think the first show I directed on was Top Cops. and then I did, which was sort of a recreation cop show, also anthology. And then I did on RoboCop and on FX, and then on some other people's shows like Earth Final Conflict and Andromeda and stuff like that. The John Waters show, Till Death Do Us Part, which was kind of a fun black comedy, and then obviously on The Strain and on the first season of Shadowhunters, I was the producing director on that show too. So it's great fun. And also, again, when you're producing the show, you can make all kinds of decisions about, look, here's where we should spend some money and some extra time, and here's where we can compress it, in a way that other directors who are coming in and out, it's hard for them to have all the context that they need to be able to make those decisions. So I really enjoyed that. And then I did a movie for Universal, a sequel to The Skulls. I directed the third Skulls movie, which was a lot of fun too. So yeah, but then, once you start to work with great directors, you realize, hey, it's one thing to be a good TV director, and it's another thing to be, a Guillermo or an Edgar or a Scott Cooper, who we did Antlers with. And those guys, they're just wired differently, and it's a good crazy that I just can't be, And so I really, I like to stay in my lane a little bit, and I'll stretch outside of it for TV episodes. But when you work with a great feature director, you realize that it takes something special. It's a special talent.
I want to move on to Nightmare Alley, which I had never really heard that before before I saw the movie, and I was like blown away. Well, how did that movie come together? Because it's not like a well-known property. Yeah.
Well, again, Guillermo is quite a film historian, so it's well known to him, and it was really kind of an American noir mini classic. Interestingly, Guillermo, when he was doing Kronos with Ron Perlman, and I don't know if you know this story, but they said, let's look for something else to do together. They had a good time on Kronos, and it was, Guillermo's first movie, and they wanted to do something. And Ron said, well, why don't we do Nightmare Alley? And I'll play Stan. And, Guillermo saw the movie, whether he had seen it or not, I'm not sure, but he saw the movie. He's like, yeah, this is great. Let's go to Fox, who has the rights, and see if we can do it. And of course they went to Fox, and Fox is like, look, we don't know who you are. But we're not letting you do that movie. Can we validate your parking? Thanks. Goodbye. What I don't think they knew at the end was that, that had been a passion project of Tyrone Power's for a long time. And when they made it, he was well into his career. He was kind of at the height of his power, I would say, in the late 40s. And he did that movie. And Daryl Zanuck didn't like it at all, because it wasn't the way he wanted Tyrone Power portrayed out there. That wasn't the look they wanted for him, the good guy leading man. And so he kind of buried it. Zanuck did, and it didn't get a big release. It didn't do well. He didn't really publicize it or market it. But Tyrone Power actually had it in his contract that it wouldn't be remade. I'm not sure, not forever, but for, I don't know, 50 years or something. And so even though I don't know that was all articulated to Guillermo and Ron when they took it to Fox in the early 90s, flash forward, 30 years, and now, Guillermo's won a couple of Oscars for Fox Searchlight with The Shape of Water, and he brings it up again. And it's like, sure, yeah, let's do it, man.
It's amazing what that Oscar will do for you.
A little bit of a nice little calling card to open the door. But, Kim Morgan, Guillermo's wife, they had talked about what to, develop. And they actually, I think they sort of took it on. They were fascinated with William Gresham, the author, and they wanted to, they kind of did it, I don't want to say as an academic exercise, but they just wanted to develop. They're fascinated by him, and they wanted to try it. So around the time they started developing it, then they went to Searchlight. We went to Searchlight, and Searchlight said yes. And it was then that we started to do it in earnest, and that Guillermo realized that he wanted to do that as his next film. So that was kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah, and to me, again, there's a lot of synergy between the Nightmare Alley story and EC Comics, which dovetails into Cabinet of Curiosity as an anthology. So let's dive into that. So how did Cabinet of Curiosities come together?
Well, Guillermo had also wanted to do something like that for a while. There were a number of his favorite stories that were out there, some Lovecraft, some others. And so we started talking about, hey, do we want to tackle an anthology, knowing how difficult that can be? And I think as much as anything, what he wanted to do, he had immense support from other mentors, early in his career, from Almodovar with Devil's Backbone, a number of them. And what he really took away from that, and the key line with Almodovar to him was, look, I'll be there if you need me, but I'm not going to be all over you. Like, it's your movie. I'm there to support you. And I think that Guillermo really felt like he wanted to, pay that back in terms of legacies of his own legacy and supporting other young filmmakers. So really, it was a combination of him having these favorite stories that he felt could work in an anthology, and then wanting to really find a number of filmmakers who were maybe needed some opportunity. They had done a movie or two, but maybe they were indie movies, and that they were well suited to the genre, and that he could be there to support them. But unlike most television, these 8 little movies that we did were all very much the voice of the director and director driven. Whereas most television, as you know, is basically run by the showrunner, and what he or she says goes, and and directors are kind of more guests, fitting into a visual style. Well, these are all very different. Some were in the 1920s, the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1970s. There was a couple of contemporary. And then so what we really did was we found some directors that we wanted to work with. We exposed them to either a particular story, or maybe we gave them a couple things to read, and which one do you think you're best suited to, and what's your take on this? And so that was kind of the development process. I mean, we had all the scripts pretty much written before the directors came on. And then, of course, some of the directors did rewrites with the original writer. Some of the directors did their own rewrites. Panos Cosmatos, for example, we showed him a couple things, and he said, hey, I'd really like to write something myself. So that was the only one that was like an original story. Guillermo co-wrote a couple of them. So it was all different, but the North Star of the project was really find directors that are well suited to the genre, who need not a boost, but really, to showcase themselves with some properly resourced productions, with a great team, because we had our whole feature team on it: production design, costume design, makeup, vis effects, all of that. So we had a great team who we've been working with for a long time, who had a shorthand, who could tackle this project. I mean, I have to say, doing 8 movies at once is not easy, and with all love and respect to all these directors, not one of them asked me one question about any of the other 7. So it was like, they were very focused on their own thing, which is good, because that's what good directors do. But it was a tough project. I mean, I will say, anthology, done well, is very, very difficult, because you're doing, new set, new costumes, new cast every week, or every couple of weeks. And so we were building some sets for 3 months that we would shoot for 3 days. Like, I don't know if you've seen Graveyard Rats, but all that tunnel, that warren of tunnels, was incredibly complex. Now, we shot there for more than 3 days. I think we shot in those tunnels for 7 or 8 days, but with a camera track that's going along the top of the tunnel with a hanging remote head camera. I mean, some very tricky stuff. So Cabinet was kind of a labor of love that took really kind of 4 years from beginning to end. I mean, I remember David Goyer wrote the first draft of the autopsy, while we were shooting Antlers in Vancouver, and that was the fall of 2018, and the show came out in the fall of 2022. So it was a long process. But that's really what he wanted to do. He wanted to really give a shot to some of these filmmakers who maybe not everybody had heard of, let their work be seen very widely on Netflix with, the proper promotion and everything else. And I think we did that. I mean, I think we were 8 for 8 on those shows.
Oh yeah.
So, it's with a great variety too. So that was the inspiration, and that was the execution.
Yeah, no, I love variety, and just all of them were just such a high quality. You talk about Graveyard Rats, and Vincenzo Natali, who directed Cube, definitely knows how to do tight claustrophobic areas. That's the perfect talent for that.
Yeah, Vincenzo Graveyard Rats was also interesting because, when we've known Vincenzo for a long time, some of these directors I didn't know. I mean, I knew Navarro, obviously from his past with Guillermo, and I knew Vincenzo very well. He's been directing shows for us for a long time, and he's such a talented director, and he's such a sweet, lovely guy. And he actually wrote that script. So even though it was from an original, so Panos was the only original story, but a few of the directors wrote their own script. Jennifer Kent wrote The Murmuring from a story by Guillermo. Vincenzo wrote Graveyard Rats, and you really see his sense of humor coming through. And David Hewlett, who played Masson, the gravedigger, went to high school with Vincenzo. They're best friends for life, basically, and they've done a lot together. So that was also interesting. It was like old home week. And of course, David, as you know, was in Shape of Water as the head security guy who worked for Michael Shannon's character. And then again in Nightmare Alley, he was the lie detector test guy who gives Bradley the lie detector. So it's old home week with David too. So it was so nice to be able to finish. We shot that last to finish with, Vincenzo and David, and like it really felt like family. But again, an incredibly complicated show with all those tunnels and falling down into piles of bones and everything else. And interesting show.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely need to ask about Panos, because he is one of the most visionary directors working today. He's just on another level. Can you share any insight on how he works, how he thinks?
I mean, look, if I could understand his mind, I'd be Albert Einstein. He's a lovely guy with some really funny ideas. And I had seen Mandy and didn't quite know what to make of it, but liked it. And then he pitched us this idea, and we just said, look, sounds interesting, sounds like fun, sounds like a different color from what we've got. And interestingly, he said, I said, well, who do you see as Lionel Lasseter? And he said, well, like the ideal would be like Peter Weller, and who's a very good friend of mine. We knew him. He directed some episodes of The Strain. So I literally picked up the phone and called Pete, like while I'm on with Panos. Pete, what are you doing in October? You got you free? Okay, you're coming to Toronto. You're the lead in this Panos. Okay. Yeah, Panos, he's in. So that was very funny. And interestingly, that I didn't know at the time, but Peter had done 2 films, Leviathan and one other film, that were directed by Panos's father, George Cosmatos.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that now.
Panos had known Peter since he was like 12 when they were shooting Leviathan at Cinecittà in Rome. So again, there was like a really beautiful symmetry to that. And yeah, look, he doesn't say much. He's sort of reserved, oddly, and has some what seemed like some kooky ideas that just when you put it all together, really kind of paid off. I mean, again, it's kind of funny, a lot of the dialogue there, but there's some existential stuff that goes on, much like most of Vincenzo's work, I will say as well. I mean, Vincenzo, everything is kind of existential with him. Graveyard Rats, not as much, but with Panos, you're kind of in that world. So, yeah, all that talk, and then people's heads exploding. I mean, what could be better?
Oh, it's fantastic. Speaking of getting ooey and gooey, in The Outside, I absolutely love Kate Micusi's performance. I'm a big fan of her musical group, Garfunkel and Oates, and seeing her step into this kind of body horror, getting covered in slime. How did she dive into that?
You know, it was so great. I mean, again, I felt like that show, being contemporary, really had something to say. As you can imagine, that show is the favorite of a lot of women.
Mhm.
But
Oh
just
yeah.
about the body shaming that goes on, and how beautiful it was with the lotion lady, and so that was interesting. And Anna Lily also
Mhm.
very strong personality, and it was interesting how that came together, because that one I think had a lot more rewriting than some of them. And casting Kate and Martin, again, some of these shows had some humor to them. I mean, I would call that sort of almost more of a dark comedy,
Yeah.
frankly. That and Graveyard Rats had kind of the most comedy. So it was fun for us, who are fans of black comedy and dark comedy, to do that show, because everything was just sort of 15% over the top, right? Like it was all on its own, level, like not entirely naturalistic. And
Right. Well,
it's
we've been covering Tales from the Crypt for a year and a half, so this is kind of our fresh of breath. But those two episodes would have fit right in. I mean, most of these would have, to some degree or another. But those two felt like easy comics.
those two 100%. So again, it was fun. Just, all the directors frankly had very different personalities and takes, and some were serious, some were fun, all were committed. And with Anna Lily and Kate and Martin and the lotion lady, and then all those crazy friends with the
Mhm.
rubbing the juice all all
Mhm.
all over each other. I mean, it's just kind of a laugh, but it's also sad. Like you're really feeling stuff for her, and I mean, a little bit of a comment on mental illness. So we everyone was very excited about that show in particular, and I think by the end, for a lot of people, that was their favorite show. Like it's like with Panos, everyone said it's either my favorite or I hate it. It's like,
Right.
some people were just like, I don't even know what to make of this. Like if you prefer sort of more linear storytelling and classic horror, that's probably not going to be the one necessarily for you. But everyone loved The Outside. It was fun to make. And I don't know if you know, but Jeremy Benning, the cinematographer, got a nomination, ASC nomination for
Mm,
that
cool.
that he's going to be at next week. And so did Taz Michos, who was the DP on The Autopsy, also got nominated. So we got 2 out of
Yeah.
the 5 nominations in limited series, which, we're very proud of that.
And then I did an interview with Henry Thomas, who's a fantastic guy. And one of the things he told me two very interesting. One, that when Guillermo talked to him, he said, you have complete freedom. If there's something I don't love, I'm gonna get on my knees and beg you to change it, but you still have the final word. And that's a really cool vote of confidence that
That was kind of the way
I
that was
trust
kind of the way
you.
it went for us too. I mean, there were some things where we had some disagreements with the directors about, on some cuts, for example, and what scenes should be in and what scenes should be out. And at the end of the day, Guillermo would say, look, I'm asking you to do this, but the final call is your call. And that is reassuring. I mean, and by the way, he gives great notes, and he's a master at, I mean, I won't say which movies, but there's a couple of movies where we've been in there in the editing room, and he's really come up with some miraculous stuff that I think the directors have been grateful for. So, but really on this one, everyone, we wanted the directors to A, feel it, and B, really be able to say that they were in pretty much complete control of, the outcome of their own product, from, script to casting to production. I mean, look, we told them the number of days it was going to be, because we did a schedule, and we felt like, we gave everybody appropriate time. But then all the way again through cutting, and sound and music, we also let the composers, I don't know if you noticed, but it's 8 different composers
Mhm.
on the 8 different shows. We suggested a couple of composers to the directors, but we also let them pick their own composers. Some of them brought composers that they had worked with previously. In some cases, we let them bring their own DPs. We had, I think, 5 out of the 8 were 2 local guys in Toronto who we had worked with before. Colin Holt, who did 3 tough ones. He did Pikmin and Dreams in the Witch House, which were by far our 2 longest schedules and busiest shows. And he also did Graveyard Rats, and then Jeremy Benning did Lot 36, and where he got a chance to work with Navarro, a great DP, and he also did The Outside. But with the other three, David Pryor brought his DP from The Empty Man. Jennifer Kent brought her DP from The Babadook, and then which one? And then Panos brought Michael Reagan, a DP that he hadn't worked with before but wanted to work with. So we gave a lot of latitude on those. You want people to be able to, paint with the toolkit that they're comfortable with. So we tried to give as much freedom as we reasonably could, to support the vision, and that can be a real tightrope sometimes. But I will say Guillermo was most heavily involved with the creature development. So that was a place where he really took the lead, because I mean, who's better at it than him? And then in visual effects, again, he's very sophisticated. And so he was kind of hand in hand with most of the directors. And a lot of the directors just said, hey Guillermo, like, whatever you want to do with visual effects, great. I'm in good hands. So, but that was really it, and those are the places that he really felt he could lend the best support. But it was always basically, look, I'm here for you. It's like Almodovar said to him, I'm here for you if you need me. And if there's something I really want, and he has said, I'll beg you to do this, but he never imposed anything on anybody in the whole process, which is,
I love that pay it forward.
Yeah.
All right. And then other plans on doing another season?
We still have a few scripts that are out there and ready to go. We had a great one with Boots Riley, who we love so much. He's another sort of Panos-ish, wonderful, crazy, great, talented visionary. So we have one that Boots wrote that we couldn't do, and we have a few other scripts sitting around. I mean, right now we're busy developing Frankenstein, our next movie. That I know hasn't been officially announced, but so we're into some heavy prep on that, and I feel with the weight of that original material, Guillermo's going to want to be have all of us focused on that, and that's including our feature team again. So we may or may not do more. It's not the thing that we're talking about right now, but knowing that we could have a long development period on that as we did last time. We're kind of open to that. People seem to really be responding to the show, and a number of our artisans have had recognition from their guilds. So we're certainly proud of the show. We also understand how hard it is to make something like that. So if we do it, we're going to want to do that with some clear runway ahead of us and a full pot of coffee.
Okay, you just perked me up because I'm a huge Frankenstein fan, and I'll just to prove it, I have a Frankenstein mouse pad.
Wow, look at you.
That my father gave me when I was a kid. So can you say anything about that, or is that still?
I can't really say too much about it. I will say it's really more faithful to Mary Shelley's book. And as we all know, Guillermo's a very serious Frankenstein fan. I'm sure you've seen a picture of the 6-foot-tall Frankenstein head that Mike Hill made for him that is hanging in the foyer at his house. But we're gonna start shooting it early next year. We're starting to cast right now. He's in the middle of writing the script, and obviously we're very excited about it. I mean, who wouldn't be excited about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein? It's like,
I just got very excited, and you
get some chills there.
Yes, is he directing?
He's directing, yeah.
Oh my God, you just made my day.
Yeah, well, I'm preparing for the journey because doing a ship in the ice and all of that is going to be a bit of a trip, but we're really excited about it. We're scouting, we're writing, we're casting. So
it's awesome.
That's the next thing that will have you understand why the next season of Cabinet may take a while, because that's gonna probably be next year.
I'll take that trade-off to get that movie. All right. Well, I want to wrap up because we're almost out of time, but our traditional last question, being dads from the crypt, we like to give dad advice. So as a father, as someone who's been very successful as an Oscar winner, what mentor dad advice would you like to give our audience?
Well, my kids are both in our industry. My son is a visual effects coordinator, and my daughter is an assistant editor So I would say to dads, be prepared to let your kids do the thing that they love and that they have an affinity for. And that's, what I always did was I supported, them in what they wanted to do and what they felt a passion for. So that's kind of my number one advice to kids. Work at home if you can. I mean,
Yeah.
there's probably not a lot of producers maybe who watch this, but a lot of guys a lot of men and women who do what I do spend a lot of time on the road. So I've made a point of trying to work at home where I can. And, we've helped to make Toronto a pretty major production hub. I did some of that, and then Guillermo came and did a lot of the heavy lifting on that one. So, take your kids to the movies instead of letting them sit in front of their video game screens, I would say, is another big, as telephones have become the narcotic of the new millennium. I think we're missing out on the communal experiences, although it is the kids who are mostly going to the theaters. So they might be doing that on their own already. So if any of that advice is useful, make sure they get their allowance on time or you'll hear about it.
I love it. All right. Well, I could talk to you for hours, I'm sure, but I need to let you go. Miles, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you?
Well, my website is demilofilm.com. My Instagram is milofx1, FX like special effects. And then, standing on a street corner with a sandwich board on saying, come see my movies.
Excellent. All right. Well, that wraps things up. We thank everyone for listening. And with that, we thank you for, we appreciate everyone for listening. With that, we thank you for listening to Dads from the Crypt.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.